Welcome, everybody, to an interview today with Dr. Sarah Zaldivar. I have Dr. Sarah Zaldivar with us, as well as my daughter, Sky. Sky is just launching on a path of exploring carnivore, and she's looking to sort of heal some metabolic syndrome symptoms. And when I saw my guest today, I was like, oh my goodness, is this woman right up my daughter's alley? So she hopped on to see maybe she might think of some thoughtful questions that I won't. So let me share Dr. Zaldivar's bio with you. So she was born and raised in Lebanon and came over to Miami to do her doctorate in exercise physiology nutrition from the University of Miami. She is currently a professor there, teaching at Miami Dade Unit College, and she's a full-time creator on a variety of social media channels. For decades, Dr. Zaldivar taught other health professionals and college students at the University of Miami and the American College of Sports Medicine about health and fitness, all while having her own health deteriorate because she was following her own advice. She eventually found freedom from binge eating, acne, weight struggles, fatigue, sugar addiction, depression, anxiety, etc., by raising her baseline dopamine levels, and by following a carnivore diet and a metabolic boosting protocol. She offers weight loss and addiction treatment guides, coaching, where she can personalize some of this expertise that she learned the hard way with her clients. And Dr. Zaldivar is sharing her Raise Your Dopamine Baseline document with us through our summit package, and you'll learn a bit more about that through the summit package. So welcome, Dr. Zaldivar.
Thank you so much for having me, Florence and Sky. I'm very excited for our chat today.
So let's start with the question of how did you become interested in fitness and nutrition to begin with? That inspired you to fly all the way, over an ocean to study.
Well, flying over the ocean was more about running away from Lebanon because I was already in nutrition. So I already got my bachelor's and my master's degree, and I did my hospital internship in Lebanon. So I already was in that field over there. But then it was the reason I chose to pursue my doctorate abroad is because there were no jobs in Lebanon, and I'm just very ambitious, and I just couldn't see a future for myself there, and that's why I got a one-way plane ticket, left for Miami, never looked back, and I met my hubby here. But the reason I was interested in this topic is because ever since puberty hit around 12, I really started being super aware about my weight, and I would do crash diets and, the binge restrict cycle where you would restrict so much and then I would last a few days and then just binge on chocolate and Nutella jars. It's crazy. And I saw my first dietitian at the age of 14. Back then, actually, they haven't really changed much. But back then it was in the midst of the food guide pyramid, like the 1990s food guide pyramid, all the carbs. And I actually started eating way more carbohydrates around that time as compared to before, because we thought, oh, it's low fat, it's good. We thought we were making a positive change. So all this stuff just kept going up until, it really didn't really completely go into remission in terms of food addiction, sugar addiction, yo-yo cycling with my weight until it started getting better and better and better. But I would say until carnivore plus raising my baseline dopamine levels. I think those two were kind of like the last things that I needed to do, because I transitioned to paleo first for skin acne, by the way. I actually have an acne cure guide and an online course. After I cleared my skin, I wrote that. And so that was the reason why I really started deviating from the mainstream recommendations that they were giving us, mainly for skin, more so than weight. Because I still believe this idea, just calories in and calories out. And this is not to say don't track, but this was kind of my thought process when it came to fixing my weight. I didn't care about too much the qualities of the food as much as what we were taught, like just count your calories and that's all. And if you're craving or binging, then it's on you. There's something that you need to fix. It's not the fault of the food. So paleo, I stumbled across it because I did everything. Accutane twice. I did spironolactone. I did birth control pills. I did antibiotics, all the creams, everything. And nothing worked except for spironolactone, I have to admit, but that's only because it mimicked a low carb environment. But then it trashed all of my male sex hormones like DHEA, which can lead to depression. And I was definitely also depressed around that period of time. So I was like, okay, my doctor was like, that's why you have none of those hormones. You need to quit taking the spironolactone. So none of the mainstream medicine traditional therapies for acne worked for me. And so that was a lot of pressure put on me to figure out the answer. So first I stumbled on paleo and it worked, but it wasn't 100%. And then keto and then carnivore. Carnivore was like the best that I found improvement in my skin and everything else really.
Okay. And so, what did you stumble on that made you think that maybe changing your diet could help you with that? I guess you were desperate, all the
Desperation,
and then you tried it.
Yeah. The first thing I really stumbled on when I really was digging through the internet files is Dr. Lauren Corday. He's retired now, but he's like the grandfather of the modern paleo movement. He was an exercise physiology professor, I think at Colorado State University, spent all his life researching ancestral diets. And he wrote a book called The Acne Cure. And I was still in Lebanon when I read that book. And they literally like emailed me the PDF file and I printed it out. But it really was the first time that I realized, wow, like my diet is affecting my skin. And by the end of the 30 days, I had like 80% clearance, 85, just from paleo. So I was eating basically meats and some fruits.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
No vegetables on that diet.
No, you could. On paleo, you could eat vegetables. Yeah, I should add that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Mainly meats, some veggies, and some fruits.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Yeah.
And yet that only got you 85% of the way. That's interesting. So what is your understanding of acne? What is it and why is it cleared up? Only 85% on paleo. Why do we need to do that extra, whatever you needed to do?
Yeah. So acne is an inflammatory skin disorder. Mainly it's driven by insulin. So when you eat carbohydrates, even things like oatmeal, it kickstarts the release of the hormone insulin from your pancreas. And insulin's job is to lower your blood sugar levels and keep them within a narrow range so that glucose doesn't affect your tissues because it can be very damaging to your cells and tissues. So every time you eat carbohydrates, especially things like grains, you are releasing a bunch of insulin. And that insulin unfortunately is also kickstarting an increase in free testosterone levels. So what it leads to is a form of hyperandrogenism. In other words, it leads to an excess release of male sex hormones, which trigger the increased production of sebum or oil from the oil glands in your follicles. And that is one critical element of developing acne. But then also you start having a blockage of the pores. And so like your skin doesn't exfoliate as well as it should. And so that is another major element. So now you have excessive sebum, blockage of the pores, a certain bacteria that prefers this kind of environment starts to overgrow, and all of those things lead to inflammation, which eventually leads to some form of acne. There's a bunch of different forms.
So interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So you cleared up your skin. Throughout that time, I know that you identify as being on the food addiction, sugar addiction spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So did you
Yes.
struggle when you started to pull out the refined carbohydrates and then ultimately the sort of even healthier forms of whole carbohydrates?
Mm.
What happened with your binge eating and your food issues? Did they get worse or like what happened?
Yeah, of course. The the binge eating and the sugar addiction really became more and more apparent the more you try to minimize carbs, right? Because if you're having carbohydrates, like I grew up in Lebanon and we ate the Mediterranean diet, so it was like rice and beans and pastas and all that kind of stuff all the time. And so you don't really feel that you're addicted to carbohydrates until you try to pull back. And so as I started to realize how critical it was for me to not eat those foods, I forgot to say also when I did keto, it was really for like the brain fog that I didn't even know I had. So when I did keto, that also relieved the brain fog. So I realized that removing carbs improved my mental health in terms of brain fog, mental clarity, and I had more mental clarity and for my skin. And so the more I tried to do that, the more you realize that's difficult, right? Because if you're normally having all kinds of like pasta or oatmeal or even paleo friendly carbs, tons of fruits or like sweet potato tubers, and you can make them in the air fryer and now you have fries, it's like you kind of really hold on to those foods to till the end until you finally realize like no, even that has got to go. So it was a really long journey. But if I want to summarize it, I would say it was a gradual approach. And when you take a gradual approach, it becomes easier as opposed to going from eating all the carbs to the next day, it's like, I'm not eating any carbs. That carbohydrates really activate the dopamine system in your brain. They actually did studies on like actual just regular carbs. We're not even talking like sugar that's super sweet, just normal carbs like pasta, bread, rice. And they scanned the brains of the participants and they saw there was a dopamine activation in the brains of those participants. And so any kind of carbohydrate is going to be more appetizing, more dopamine releasing, more addicting in a way than protein or even fats. So gradually decreasing it over time really helped me develop better habits and it became easier. But really, I would say, again, I go back to raising my baseline dopamine because you've got all kinds of blogs and advice telling you that you can release dopamine in so many different ways. But usually what they're talking about is like this transient acute quick release of dopamine. Like, yeah, I know, if you do drugs, you're going to release dopamine. If you have a cupcake, I'm going to release dopamine. If I go shopping, I'm going to release dopamine. But that's not really raising my baseline. The one where from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, you have a high baseline dopamine level. It's elevated and you're feeling excited, motivated, happy the whole way through. And that's the goal. The goal is not to just figure out how to release that can be helpful, like taking a bath or going shopping. That can be helpful for some people as opposed to binging on foods that are going to wreck their health. Sure, but that's not a long-term solution. That's like putting a band-aid on the wound for a quick little relief. But even how many shopping sprees are you going to do before you go broke? How many baths are you going to take before you start really lagging in your productivity? Your business starts to suffer. So those are good here and there, but the ultimate goal, I think, should always be to raise your baseline dopamine levels. And so that's really like what helped me the most.
Yeah, and I was going to say, go there, take us there. How do we all raise our baseline dopamine?
You're right. Okay, now here's the part that there are two answers to the question. One answer is people don't really like it. The other one, they probably are gonna love it. And it's great because then you can choose whichever one works for you. There are two ways. You can either raise it via exercise, whereby you're doing uncomfortable workouts beyond your comfort zone. So whether it's lifting weights or whether it's doing cardio, it has to be outside your comfort zone because dopamine is an anesthetic. It anesthetizes pain, sensation of pain, both physical and emotional. And so if you are training within your comfort zone, like you're hopping on a treadmill and it's like a cardio joyride, that's not enough comfortable feelings or discomfort to trigger the release of more baseline dopamine. Why would the brain use up any of its resources, time, energy, effort to create more dopamine cells and dopamine receptors and all the machinery in between if you don't give it a very strong reason? And so if it's an easy thing, working out, where you're not really getting uncomfortable, that's not really a strong enough reason for your brain to go through all the hoops for it to change its structure. So it has to be outside your comfort zone. So what I tell my clients is, when you're working out, start counting when it gets really uncomfortable. When it starts kind of hurting, that's when you start counting. All the reps before, you're just maintaining. That's not really gonna upregulate or raise that baseline dopamine, right? So that's one answer. Some people may not be able to work out. If you're 300, 400 pounds deep in the throes of food addiction, that's not gonna be a solution for you. And that's okay, because you can get exactly the same effect without having to work out. I'm not saying that you shouldn't work out. I think once you can, it's always helpful, but there's definitely another equally strong solution, and that's the visualization. So when I first started talking a lot about dopamine, because I did it by raising my baseline dopamine, because I've always been an athlete and I like to work out. So I did it this way. But then, working with clients, and especially people who have hundreds of pounds to lose, who have joint issues, need joint replacements, like, we have to figure out a solution for this. And so that's when I really delved deep into the visualization world. And I wrote a guide on that. So first I wrote a guide, the Dopamine Brain. Which guide are we giving everybody who's watching?
Dopamine Brain and Monster Mind.
Perfect. Oh, I'm giving them both?
Sorry, the Dopamine Body Guide.
Oh, the dopamine. Okay. So you're getting is the weight loss guide. It's like my flagship weight loss guide. So what I'm referring to are those two other guides. So Dopamine Brain is the one that teaches you how to follow the exercise as a form of a brain rehab protocol. And then the Monster Mindset Guide has the visualization part. So they both do the same thing. They both raise baseline dopamine, but one does it with exercise, one does it with the mind, with visualizations. There are two types of visualizations that I coined: training visualization versus energy visualization. So training visualization is when you visualize yourself successfully not binging or successfully throwing away that cookie that was in your hand. You visualize it in your head like you did it successfully multiple times, because the brain cannot differentiate between a visualized scenario and real life. And the better you get a visualization, the more vivid those visualizations get, the less repetitions you need to mentally rehearse to get that benefit. So the training visualization, you're rehearsing that thing that's difficult to do, which is usually not eat the sugar. Or if you started or you're halfway through a binge or whatever, normally you would just go all the way. But if you use training visualizations, you can train your brain to think that you can, in fact, stop at any point. So that's one. That's the most important one. The other one is kind of important, but maybe not as important as training visualization. The other one is called energy visualization. Energy visualization is when you are visualizing your ideal goal. So whether it's your ideal body or ideal health habits or ideal bank account, like how much your bank account should have, or your ideal lifestyle, like, can visualize yourself in a mansion, or, so whatever goal you're working on. Now, if we're talking right now about food addiction, then we're generally talking about ideal body and health and skin and all that kind of stuff. So you can visualize that over and over and over again. And that releases dopamine on demand. As a matter of fact, they've shown that can increase dopamine release by 65% just in one session. Like, while it feels so good, it's so addicting. So I don't really have to sell it as much, because once you start doing it, like, you're gonna keep doing it, which is why I like to bring them back and be like, yeah, that's great. You're doing your energy visualizations, you're releasing all the dopamine, but I also need you to do the training visualization. Because if you only visualize your ideal body and ideal skin all the time feels good, but that does not necessarily translate in you being able to do the actions that are going to get you there. This is where training visualization comes in. Training visualization is the one that trains your brain. It gets the reps under your belt so that you become a pro at not eating sugar. You become a pro at working out when you need to. You become a pro at all those things because you've already done them hundreds of times in your brain. So it compresses the amount of time it takes for you to get really good at doing those hard to do things, or kind of hard to do tasks that will get you to your ideal goals.
That is so amazing. So you said they have studied that visualizations can raise dopamine. Who is that? What was that research done?
It's linked. So in the Monster Mindset Guide, are you going to edit this, or because I don't want to take too much of your time to go
It's
get you
okay.
the thing.
It's not off the top of your head. That's okay. I can.
Yeah, I can send you the link. So here's the thing. Visualization is a form of meditation, and there's tons and tons and tons of studies on meditations showing how much dopamine release happens. Let me try and find it real quick. I'm almost there. If you hang in there for a second. It's around page 13 in the Monster Mindset Guide, which is when I start talking about visualization.
So you look that up. I'm going to do a quick little summary. So what we're hearing
I found it. Yes.
Oh, you did. You take it away.
Yeah. So the name of the article is called "Meditation Experience Predicts Negative Reinforcement Learning and is associated with attenuated FRN amplitude." It's a 2019 paper that was published in the journal Cognitive and Affective Behavior Neuroscience. So yeah, there you go. And I don't know if I can send you the direct link. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. No, fantastic. That was great. Thank you. So
you're very welcome.
Basically what you're saying is that we need to raise our baseline of dopamine, not chasing these quick little dopamine hits that burst and leave us, leave us high and dry. In fact, we also know that when we're looking at drugs and alcohol and sugar and high intensity things like scrolling on our screens, that kind of stuff that give us little bits of dopamine, that they actually can overstimulate us and create a downregulation of dopamine receptor sites. Or Dr. Lustig's book, The Hacking of the American Mind, will tell us that we can actually kill the dopamine receptor sites. They're the only brain cells that can actually be burnt off, and they'll never regenerate. So that's not the way to get dopamine. So what you're saying is the way to get dopamine is by working with the body and the mind. The body is through exercise, and the mind is through both visualizing what you want, what lights you up, what brings the thought of joy and peace and happiness. It just makes you feel so, so good. And visualizing you letting go of the things that are in the way of you getting what you want. Right? The letting go of the sugar, the sleeping in, the sitting on the couch and watching TV instead of going out for a run or whatever.
That's the key there, because a lot of people talk about manifesting and the law of attraction. Just think about your ideal life. And that's great. It makes you feel good. It gets you motivated because it releases dopamine, gets you motivated to seek that out. It's not enough. That's where the vast majority of the law of attraction content goes awry, because they stop there, where what you should be adding and really focusing a lot more on is the training visualizations, actually rehearsing, doing the hard tasks that you need to do in real life to get to your ideal goal.
Got it. There's an amazing quote. I think it's Hippocrates, and I could be wrong. And I think it goes something along these lines that before I agree to treat a patient, I ask them, are you willing to give up what's making you sick? Are you willing to give up what's making you sick? And it kind of reminds me of that, right? That we need to visualize us being able to successfully let go of the brownies and the bread and whatever we need to let go of. Yes. Also, can we tap into what we truly want and have? So that's just so clear and so.
Yeah. And if you feel like, I can't stop, you know how some people tell you, I can never stop eating bread, or I can never do that. And the only reason they say that is because when they when they visualize the scenario of them not eating bread, they feel bad, right? But that's okay. You're supposed to feel uncomfortable when you're doing those training visualizations. The thing is, they visualize it once, it feels bad. It's like, oh, I can't stop eating bread. But if you keep visualizing yourself not eating bread over and over and over hundreds of times, this is how you know you succeeded, because in the visualization, you stop feeling the resistance. That's the secret. And then once it stops feeling hard in your mind, I already know I did it. And now in life, it's easy, and I stop doing whatever it is I want to stop doing.
You've worked out in the mind those moments that are so hard to fight in the body, right? That
Yes,
okay,
because
you know what I'm saying?
and
Yeah.
they've done studies. I've added them also, those studies in the Monster Mindset Guide. They've done, or you can just look them up on Google. They've done studies with tons of different kinds of sports, and but let's focus on one, for example, where they got two groups of people, and one group they taught them how to play the piano with a real piano. Another group they taught them how to play the piano, but told them you can't touch a piano, you have to rehearse playing that piece on the piano. And then there was a control group, of course, that didn't do anything. And they saw, and then they asked them to perform that piece, and the people who played on the piano performed just as well as the people who only rehearsed playing on the piano. So the brain doesn't know the difference. As long as you're doing the work, whether it's like with physical or in the mind, it's the same. There are some studies, I have to say that there are some studies that show that sometimes rehearsing it is 50% as effective as real life. That's still huge. So even if I look at that study, that's still phenomenal, because look how much time you have during the day to rehearse it. In the morning, when you're brushing your teeth, when you're making your bed, and for us, if we're doing makeup, hair, whatever, like there's so much time doing the dishes, driving. It's, this is the game changer.
Absolutely. And I've seen those studies too. And I've seen the studies where some people lifted weights in their minds, they visualized it, and some people actually picked up weights. And okay, it
Yes.
wasn't as pronounced, but there was still muscle being built just because the mind was imagining the pumping of the iron. It's so
There
incredible.
you go. There you go. And on top of that, the better you get at it, you become more of an experienced meditator. Because every time I say visualization, it's just a form of meditation, is what it is.
Mhm.
But you're focused, why meditate and focus on the breath in and out, when you can focus on what you want to make happen in your life? It's so much more efficient, right, and effective. So that also, as you become more and more experienced with it, your visualizations become more and more vivid. And that's the key. The more vivid they are, the more you can feel them. That's when it becomes easier, and you don't have to do as many reps, and it raises your baseline dopamine also that way.
That's incredible. I did not know. I did not know that piece of the puzzle.
Yes.
So let me
Yeah.
ask you this
There's
question.
there's a study that it's also linked in the Monster Guide. I'll email you the direct link of that particular study, because when I read it, it was just such an eye opener, where they actually, like the authors say, like the more experience you get, then that raises, and they call it like the baseline dopamine goes up, which I was like, this is amazing. I need to write a guide about that. And I did.
Oh gosh, yeah. So cool. So the
Yeah.
things that we typically chase for some dopamine to feel good, for the anesthetizing effects of it, and for the
Yeah.
energizing, motivating effects of it.
Mm.
Um, why is exercise and visualizing different? Why does that raise baseline? And, eating sugar, or like what are other sort of shopping? Why don't those raise baseline?
Mm. So, because the shopping or the eating sugar or drugs, any kind of drug, there is no discomfort associated with the high. So you're getting cheap dopamine. You didn't have to work for it really hard. It felt very comfortable to do it. You just got your wallet out and you paid. There was no real feeling of discomfort. The only way you raise baseline dopamine is when you get uncomfortable. So while I try to make it look like, oh, visualization is great, and because if you don't want to work out, it still feels uncomfortable. As a matter of fact, it has to feel uncomfortable for you to know that it's working. Just try to sit down and focus on, let's say not drinking coffee anymore. Like if people right now just close their eyes breathe deeply and try to focus. Okay, tomorrow I'm not drinking coffee. You're gonna feel the resistance inside. You're still getting uncomfortable. That's what triggers the machinery for your brain to start upregulating its baseline dopamine. It has to be attached to a feeling of discomfort.
Wow. Okay, interesting. Yes. All right. Now I want to get into the practicality of how do we do visualization? Like, is there any sort of like crash course you could give us on how to get good at that?
So the way is very simple. I luckily had taken a semester when I first started teaching at the University of Miami. I just landed from Lebanon, and I didn't really have public speaking experience, and I was this like little immigrant. Just they threw me with all of these kids that are American kids that are a lot of them are very well off. University of Miami is not a cheap university, and it was it was a lot of anxiety. I remember like walking towards the classes to teach, and I could feel my heart beating out of my chest the first few, I would say the first few years, 2, 3 years. But I wasn't teaching every single day. I was teaching twice a week. But still, like look how many hours of teaching it took for me to finally be comfortable with public speaking. So until I figured it out that it was just I needed to be over prepared and I needed to, learn everything about it. And that was gonna completely eradicate my anxiety. That was the answer. If anybody's struggling with public speaking, you just gotta be over prepared. That's all it is. I I was trying all kinds of stuff to handle the anxiety, because it's just brutal to be feeling so anxious the whole time instead of enjoying it. So one of the things that I did, I took a whole semester. I'd wake up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and I would meditate for 2 hours straight. I used the app, Headspace app. I recommend it to everybody.
Mhm.
Definitely, if you want to learn the basics, you can just literally get a subscription. It's like $10 or $13 a month. Just do 1 month, or just do like 1 week of that, and take those guided meditations. They're so fantastic because they teach you in a guided meditation very calmly and at the right points in time how to meditate. Like close your eyes, do a body scan, be aware of any surrounding noises. Because just being aware of them cancels them out in terms of your attention no longer being there. If you just pay attention that there's a little bit of static in the background, just pay attention to it. It kind of fades into the background. Pay attention to where the weight of your body is as you're sitting down. Is it more to the right? Is it more to the left? You just do a quick body scan. And then after you do those first few preparatory things, which by the way, they're not really necessary for visualization, but I'm just telling you, if you want to get the most effective bang for your buck from the first session ever, then that's what you would do. And then with the Headspace app, we're meditating. So we're focusing on the breath. So then your focus shifts towards the breath. Is it deep? Is it shallow? Do you still feel any tension? If you feel like your throat, there's a little bit of tension there, you're aware of it, then that releases the tension. And you stay focused on the breath in terms of using the Headspace app and how they train you to meditate. All I'm saying is, instead of, you can do all that. All I'm saying is now when you're visualizing, remove the focus on the breath and replace that with a focus on the scenario that we're working on. And that can change. Like at times I'm focused on visualizing what I need to do to be more productive to grow my business. So how many content pieces I should put out, like what it takes to be productive for, let's say, 10 hours straight. What are the actions that I need to focus on? For example, I visualize a lot, not picking up my phone and checking social media every, let's say, 10 minutes, it works. Or every time I log into my YouTube and I want to upload a video, YouTube already is logged in. It tells me how many new comments I have on my video. So I've trained myself to see that red little bell icon and not click it. I don't need to know what are the comments right now. I'm focused, you see? So whatever it is you're working on, that's the training visualization. You replace the focus on the breath with the focus on that training visualization you're working on. And over time it gets better. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I started with Headspace as well. I highly recommend it. And what I love is that he has this orient out, you orient in, orient out, orient in, right? So we don't get stuck just being, some of us come from backgrounds of, most of us come from backgrounds of trauma, I would say. And so we either can be hypervigilant inside, we're way over focused on sensations and distress and anxiety and moods. And others of us are hypervigilant externally. We're always looking for threats. We see threats everywhere. Either way, we're anxious or depressed
Yeah.
or both. And so when we start to learn to meditate through headspace, we're learning to sort of orient in a way that isn't hypervigilant. It's calm and it's present, and our body can register that right now, right here in this moment, I'm safe. I'm safe. And that can create a state shift. And the same thing inside, that we can slowly learn how to feel what's going on inside without spooking ourselves and, running to the cupboard or running to food or scrolling or shopping or whatever it is. So once we've learned to sort of be able to breathe in and breathe out and just stay focused on the breath, then we've been able to train the brain to stop being hypervigilant to what's going on emotionally, to what's happening in people's faces or the outside world. And then we've got this superpower, the mind, that we can direct toward letting go of the things that are blocking us from getting what we want, that have brought comfort because we've been in these distressed states, and the things that bring us joy, spark joy.
Perfectly said. There's something that I also recommend to do. It's called habit stacking. Every time you feel like the stress of the day has built up, it becomes an automatic trigger to develop this habit of doing a quick visualization. So when you're getting stressed out or you're, just it builds up over the day, what I do is, okay, this is my trigger right now. Before I start any new project, any new task, I sit down, I take a few minutes, 5 minutes at the max, and I do an energy visualization, because then energy visualization is a little bit easier, and it gives you a lot more, and it gives you so much inspiration when you visualize why you're working so hard, why you're doing all this, because that's the goal. It reminds you why, and it makes you immediately feel better and more motivated. And it's like, okay, let's go. And then we're ready for the next task.
Got it. Love it. So you say that you feel that you cured your sugar addiction. Tell us a bit more about
Yeah.
that. What did you do and why do you feel like it's cured?
Yeah, it's and it's funny because sometimes people will say, well, if you touch something sweet all of a sudden, like if I add a tiny bit of honey in a tea, then you're not cured. And it's not true, because what is addiction? Addiction is a feeling of being out of control. If you're 1 teaspoon away from falling apart, if you're just 1 teaspoon away from, let's say, a little bit of honey from falling apart, you haven't cured addiction. You're still operating from a weakened, vulnerable state. You want to have power over. There's no substance in the universe that should have power over you. And if you're thinking, oh, but how can that be? Sugar has been, shown to be even more addictive than heroin or whatever. Well, remember the heroin users, a lot of the Vietnam veterans, when they were there, they really dabbled in a lot of heroin usage. And they studied them. When they came back, 80% of them who dabbled and took a bunch of heroin over there, they did not get addicted. 80% of them. Only 20% developed a heroin addiction, even after they came back from Vietnam. And so it just goes to show you, it's not about exposure to the drug. It's about so many other things. What's going on here, your baseline dopamine level, your baseline mood. How are you feeling about what you're doing in your life? What are you chasing? Are you chasing your dream? Are you following your passion? Are you living in alignment with what you need to be doing? We were born to do something great with our lives. And when we try to suppress that and try to be more like, oh, like this is just too risky, or I don't know if I could do that, or I'm too old, or, all the excuses that we give ourselves, all those things chip away at our psyche. And now we're operating from a weakened state. Now everything becomes very difficult to handle. And, so I think it's really important. Like first, let's start with the definition, what it means to be addicted. That's number one. And then number two is, I didn't do it overnight. I didn't go from 5,000 calorie binges to nothing. I started over time getting better and better. And then the binges became 3,000 calories. And then they became 2,000 calories. And they became 1,000 calories. And now I don't binge anymore. And so it took a while. And sometimes it's important for people to realize, like, This is a long, not necessarily long, sorry, I shouldn't say long, because I think now that you have the tools, especially everything we talked about right now, it really should be pretty quick. But for me, I was figuring it out as I go. And so that's why it took me longer. Um, and there was this gradual improvement until finally I can say I have food freedom, which is like my brain isn't constantly food focused and thinking, oh, can I have this? Can I have that? And try to, and which brings me to another major point. When people say, oh, I can't visualize, what is food focus? You're visualizing anyway. Whether you like it or not, your brain is visualizing the whole day. The only problem is you're visualizing what you shouldn't be doing. You're visualizing, should I have this donut, or should I do this, or trying to give yourself excuses as to why it's okay for you to have it just this one time. Or it's like, oh, I feel like my brain's about to explode. I have to have it right. No, you're visualizing those potential actions and then you act on it. So you're constantly visualizing. Your brain is really good at visualizing. It's just you've been visualizing the wrong things for so long, you got so good at it. And so now you need to get really good at the complete opposite. And you want to visualize your goals and you want to visualize your ideal, whatever life is, whatever it is that you want to work on.
Right. One thing that's interesting about what you've shared is that you haven't talked about diet. You haven't said you need to be paleo or keto or carnivore to raise your dopamine baseline.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, and that's a great point, because there are so many ways to live a sober life and feel in control and feel happy and not addicted. It doesn't have to be just carnivore. Not everybody has to do 100% carnivore, if you have a little bit of even fruit. I know, like within the food addiction, sugar addiction world, like fruit is also something that people are scared of. And I'm not saying it might not trigger a little bit more of this need for sweetness, but nobody's life got destroyed because they binged on fruit. Like that's not the thing. It's really more ultra processed, like we were talking before we started, right? It's like the ultra processed food combinations where you are adding all of the different addictive elements in food, the starches plus the sweeteners plus fats and salt and sometimes caffeine and sometimes dairy, like the casein and the dairy, all those things. And then you put them all together, the addictive potential now is just magnified. Or then you add the crispy nature to it, the natural flavors. This is like the new frontier. Nobody's talking about how much flavors, even if they're called natural flavors, can also influence this craving and can lead to food addiction or just magnify a food's addictive potential. So as long as you're eating whole foods, you can be sober. It doesn't have to be carnivore, it doesn't have to be a specific thing. It's just, but if you're focused on whole foods, it tends to be usually more, at least hopefully paleo keto, pasta, rice I don't recommend it just in general for anybody, because it can really mess up, like with your blood sugars going up and down. So those are the things, and think of them as a little bit more processed too to make the pasta. It's not like you're getting the wheat with the hull and everything. And then if you are going to get it like really whole foods, you have to remember also there's an element of plant toxins, plant anti-nutrients, which is a big theme within the carnivore community. And I've done tons of YouTube videos on plant anti-nutrients or plant toxins, because plants, they don't just sit there waiting for you to eat them, right? Without any self-defense mechanism whatsoever. They have evolved over millions of years to become master chemists, to be able to increase the production of certain defense chemicals in them. So when you consume them, whether it's you or an animal or an insect, you, over a long enough period of time, that species gets weakened, their fertility drops, and they might get more diseased. And so it's really a race for survival is what it is in terms of all the species. So it's not probably the best idea to be consuming tons of plant foods.
Got it. Let me bring Sky back in here and see if she has any questions for us.
I do. Can you hear me?
First time I'm using this
Yeah,
platform.
take your time. No worries.
I have no idea how to.
You found her? No?
Can you guys hear
Oh
me?
my goodness. Sure, I think I got it.
Oh,
Hey,
Hey, Heather.
hi. That was very
you're
close.
back.
Oh my gosh, not my angle. Anyways, I just want to say I'm just super happy to be here for the ride and just like hear what you have to say, because everything that you're talking about, I know of per se, but I don't know like the details of, and I feel like you've really wrapped it up in a really well said way, and I'm really grateful to have it a little bit more clear to me. And I'm also feeling incredibly inspired, and I just want to share something I noticed about me being in this um, interview with you two is I could feel my mind wandering, and I can feel my mind like wanting to tap out and like go and cook myself breakfast or go do something. And all of a sudden, I literally, like, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes ago, I was like, actually, I kind of like this. Like, I could sit here forever. So something switched. And I feel like you talking about dopamine, to me, that seems like potentially there was like a dopamine switch, because this wasn't easy for me to just sit here right off the hop. Like, I just woke up and blah, blah, blah. Like, it was like, oh, there's so much else I want to be doing with my morning. But this is obviously all of the information that I'm very, very intrigued by, and I'm so excited to learn more about. And so, yeah, it was kind of interesting to have you explain that. And then I kind of noticed something in myself. So I just wanted to share that. I thought that was really cool.
Oh, so happy to hear that. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I'm also just curious to know, you did talk about how you have explored carnivore for yourself to heal your acne and your brain fog. And I'm curious to know, is
Yeah.
that something that you still follow? Are you still actively on the carnivore diet?
Yes. And just in case anybody's wondering, I do keep dairy in. So I have full acne clearance while I do keep some cheese, and I
That was my
keep
next question.
whipped butter. Yes, and it works for me. It works so far. In terms of skin, I'm not saying this is probably like the best thing ever, but compared to the fact that I'm not eating anything else, it's fine. A little bit of, like, basically meat and some cheeses and whipped butter. That's what I do. I don't do milk because I am lactose intolerant, and I've done the 23andMe genetic test, and it confirmed to me that I'm lactose intolerant. And so I don't do too much cottage cheese. I can have like a handle, a bowl, but too much of that, then it comes with a lot of extra lactose, and it's really hard for us to digest lactose just as a population in general. So yeah, those are the only things I minimize in terms of dairy.
Cool. Yeah, that's really, really good. That was my next question, because for me, I started off as a vegan, and I was not doing good. I would say there was a lot of different factors that were contributing to me not thriving. I was eating sometimes like the plant-based meats, and I was eating rice and tofu and like just lots of really high carbs. And so my transition from veganism to then I went keto was like so insane. I was like, this is impossible. And I tried to do keto a million times. And then as of recently, I would say like it's probably like day 8 or 9 that I've been doing carnivore. And
Oh,
I've kept dairy in, and I feel night and day in every possible way. But I'm curious to know, because some people are like, yeah, it's a therapeutic intervention. It's not meant to be a long-term dietary lifestyle. It's meant to be a short-term thing. But then I see people that are like, I've been carnivore for 30 years, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm always like, I don't know how long I need to be on this diet. Like, I don't know if there's like a timeline. So I'm started with 30 days, but I'm just curious. And then I'm also curious if you are okay with seasoning and what you think about that.
it depends. It depends which seasoning. So let's say there was a period of time where we would get this Mongolian beef seasoning. It was the most delicious thing I've ever had. And I would get ground beef and I would add Mongolian seasoning on top of it. And it was like a good month, me and my hubby going crazy with it. And then I was like, it tastes way too good. And then you check the ingredient list and it's all sugar and starch. Just like the sheer amount of carbohydrates in that thing was just out of control. Actual sugar. You're literally adding sugar to the beef. That's why it tastes so good. So It really depends on what seasoning blend we're talking about. If it's like an individual thing and it helps you transition, then I would say go for it. When I really started doing carnivore, I was using taco seasoning. I was using all that kind of stuff initially. Now I don't do that anymore. But it became, because it's easy for me to not do it, because it's like one more thing that I'm, eliminating. But if you come from, like, your taste buds are so used to all kinds of different flavors, and you go from that to nothing but meat, it's just such a hard transition for most people. And I recommend gradually going there. And you're still going to get an insane benefit from it, even if you're having seasoning. So I wouldn't worry about that right now. Again, unless it's something crazy like the Mongolian beef seasoning, which, just check the ingredients, see how many calories it's got. It shouldn't have calories, generally speaking, or very minimal.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
There's so much back and forth about what carnivore is and what you can and can't do and this and that. And I'm like, I'm just curious to know more people's experiences.
So one more thing that I forgot to answer is that, it's true for some people, they can just do it as an elimination diet and then they're fine, right? And then they can go back and reintroduce. And I think the vast majority of people can go back and reintroduce, because you might have a little bit of an overgrowth in your gut bacteria. It's called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because every time we eat carbs, generally speaking, as a species, we're not really adapted to eat such massive amounts of carbohydrates that is found in our modern food environment. And so we can't really digest it as effectively. So what ends up happening, it becomes food for the bacteria in our small intestine. And I'm not saying it's bad bacteria. It can even be good bacteria. But if you overfeed good bacteria, it becomes a problem. They start overgrowing greater than what they're supposed to, greater than the population size that they're supposed to stay at. So a lot of people have that, the SIBO. And so when you do carnivore, it can starve this overgrowth and it can kill them off. And so then you can go back and reintroduce some fruits. You can go back and reintroduce some other foods, and see if, if you're still feeling great, then you should be able to continue, adding things until you've added so many things to the point where now you went back and you felt the way that you did before you started carnivore. At that point, it's like you went too far. But at the end of the day, I would say the closer you stay carnivore, the better you're generally going to feel.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much. That's really good to know.
You're very welcome. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Skye, for jumping in. I'll let you have the final word. Is there any final things you would like to share with us today? Some final thoughts?
I would just say, if you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're right, so because you're visualizing, right? If you think you can, you're visualizing that you can. If you think you can, you're visualizing that you can't, and your brain can't differentiate between the two. And you visualize something enough times, it becomes your identity. And the strongest, and this is what Tony Robbins always says, the strongest force in nature is your identity, what you identify with. And so you can create your identity just by visualizing the identity that you want. You can either keep visualizing eating the sugar and veering off track and doing that kind of stuff. You visualize it enough times, which, by the way, most people are already there, because that's the path of least resistance, because you don't have to change it, right? And so they're constantly visualizing that, and becomes their identity. This is why it's so hard for them to change. But then once you're aware of it, it's like, okay, well, why am I visualizing this? I'm just wasting thoughts. Let me drag them to what I really want in life. And you start visualizing you eating healthy and you being disciplined. And you can visualize that successfully in your head countless times. Your brain doesn't know the difference. And now you become this person. And now when you actually attempt to act that way in real life, you're like, wait, there's no resistance. Normally I couldn't ever do that. But the thing is, you trained your brain, you rehearsed it in your brain, and you can rehearse it successfully as many times as you want. So now in real life, it just became effortless. And now and you do that enough times, it becomes your identity. And now you can't change back to the way you are again. So that's what I would say. Trust your intuition, trust your gut, stay in alignment. It knows what you're supposed to be doing. It's like, are you going to live out of fear or out of faith? Always lead with faith over fear. Believe that you can do anything that you want, because you are a limitless being. And with enough reps, anything is possible.
Thank you so much for such beautiful, clear wisdom. And if you want to, of course, you'll want to go and check out drsarahzaldivar.com is her website. And you'll see that she's got these guides. They're really affordable. Like her monster guide, I think it's $49 or something. Her raising
Yeah, it's $34.99 now. I fixed the price on that, so that's more of it. Yeah.
it's a song. It's a song. It's a cost of a book. So you can
Yeah.
scoot over there and tap
Yeah.
her brain in even deeper ways. And thank you so much for your time again, Dr. Zaldivar.
Thank you so much, Florence and Sky. I appreciate you giving me the time to share my message. I had a fantastic time, and I am so grateful to have met you.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Bye-bye.